All right. Hopefully in this video, we're going to wrap up at least the most critical parts of Auth. We're not going to have everything in Auth done because there's a lot, but we need at least enough that we can log in and obviously remain, have the state of the application, understand that we are a logged in user versus a guest. If we can at least get that good, we can start moving on to some more fun things because Auth is really important, but it's also kind of boring, to be honest. And I would have loved if we could have started with something a little more interesting and fun, but I think there's been some fun stuff in here too. I don't want to put myself down too much. Where we kind of left it, we were working with our Auth service provider directly, which is essentially, if we go to our Auth service, basically a way to talk to Serverpod and authenticate people. We have registration in here. We have confirming registration, all that kind of stuff. And that is fine. However, we don't really want to work with our service directly in our UI. We essentially want to be working with another provider. Now, we already have an auth provider here. And this we already have working for when it initializes, basically checking if the user's already logged in, because Serverpod will save basically a token for them, and we can kind of put them in a different state, either they're a guest or success, or potentially an error if something went wrong. So what I want to really just jump into now is, rather than in our main.dart talking to the auth service, I want to be talking to our auth provider. That way, when things change, when we do something, this provider can essentially communicate with itself and update the state accordingly. Rather than us, every time we call this, we then have to talk to the auth provider. We're looking at maybe doing it this way, setting the user through here, but it just doesn't make sense. And I gave it some more thought and looked at some other project I made, and I'm like, no, that doesn't make sense. So instead, what we're going to do, we're going to kind of, if we look at our auth service, we already have a login with email here. So we're going to kind of do a little bit of duplication. However, it's different, and you'll see in a minute. So what we're going to do on our auth provider is actually do a future void. This, at least right now, won't return anything. We might decide to return an error or something. But this is essentially going to manage the state on its own, so it doesn't really have to return anything, at least not yet. So we'll just do login with email. We'll keep the name the same, and we'll even keep the parameters the same, because these are good parameters. There's nothing wrong with them. And this will be async. And right here, what we want to do, instead of talking to our Serverpod client, because we don't have access to that here anyways, we could get access. We could do a ref.read and get access, but it doesn't make sense. We want to we don't want to duplicate all the code. We just want the core thing. So we're actually going to call this. So we're going to do something like result equals ref.read, and now we're going to read the auth service provider as opposed to the auth provider. They're very different. And with this, we're going to call this function, login with email. And look, past that email and past that password, everything's good. Cool, so we'll do that first. And then this does return an either, so we want to fold on this. So we don't want to return, we just want to do result.fold. And so we might have an error, and in the case we have an error, we'll do something. Otherwise, we might have some success, because this returns user info, so we can actually just call this user info. And we will go and do something there. All right. Oh, so I'm getting this error here saying result.fold, and it's like it's not a type for future, and that's because we have to await this. And now we see everything's good. Okay, so in the case that there's an error, we can actually update our state. So we're already kind of doing this. Let's just make a little more room. When it initializes it, in fact, this will be kind of similar, and we might find a way to make this a little more reusable. But we want to basically go state equals auth state error and pass in that error. And then we'll be able to, potentially in the UI show it. If we have a success, then we're going to essentially make one more call. And this is so that we can get our actual user. Because remember, we have a custom user that we've made. We don't want just the user info. We want everything about them. So we're going to go like this, and we're going to go user result, just so we have a different name here, equals, and we'll do ref.read, again, our auth service provider. And we'll do .me. Oh, maybe it's not that. It's the user service provider, right? So our user service provider, just to remind us, is everything to do with users. Right now we only have one call, me. This will go out and get me. And if we go to the server, the actual server side part, we have our me endpoint, which looks for an authenticated user. It might return null if no one's logged in, and in which case we go, okay, you're a guest. Otherwise, we go and we find our user. from the database, which this has some custom fields in it. We actually have like a bio, and we're going to eventually add a lot more things, but I just want to have one example for now. And then we actually include the user info within that, so that as long as we have a user, we also have the user info. It kind of combines it all together. Super nice. Okay, so there we go. And if we go back to our auth provider and finish this up, what do we want to do? We want to go me, and oops. And similarly, this is a future still, so we need to await it. Which means we have to make this function async, because this is a function here. It's a function within a function. It's like a kind of like a callback when everything's good. So we'll make that async so that we can do this. Then we want to go user result.fold, and the same kind of thing. We might have an error, so we'll do that. And in which case, it's really the same thing, auth state error. On write, we're going to have a user. Now, if we look at this user, we'll see. Actually, wait, the user state. What does this return? I just want to remember how this works. It either returns a string or a user, not authenticated. I think I kind of want to rework this, not to necessarily make an error, but instead, if the user's null, we'll still return write, and we'll just pass in null here. Because to me, that's not really an error. It's just saying they're not logged in. And we can now make this optional. All right, so then we have me. Then we can go here, wait, state equals this. So now you'll see this user is potentially null. So we can go if user equals null, then we can actually make our state equal to auth state guest. Otherwise, we can make our state equal to auth state success and pass through that user there. Because remember, this actually requires us to pass a user in, just like this requires us to pass an error in. All right. Now we're seeing right here, we're having this little error. And if we actually look at our problems tab, we'll probably see that error somewhere in here too. Yeah, the argument type user can't be assigned here. And that's because now we're allowing this to be null. So we're actually going to do the same kind of thing. If user equals null. And that's what I'm saying. We'll probably refactor this at some point. How do we do it here? If user equals null, yeah, okay. Else do this. We'll probably refactor this because there is some duplication here. But that's an easy fix at some point, and I just want to really get through auth, frankly. Now, in here, there's probably a case result, either, let me just see, state equals that. No, I think this is good. Okay, so we'll save everything here. So now in our main.dart, where we're just temporarily doing things, we have a login right here. And instead, yeah, we want to pass through, I see already, when I was playing around, I already had this code here, but we're going to talk to our auth provider instead of our other one and see if we can make stuff work. So let's test this out. We'll go to Dart here. I'm just going to log out, which because we don't have the logout hooked up to this, we're not going to get the state update. So I see I'm hello guest. If I go log in now, I'm instantly Tyler, which is super nice. Now, obviously, we haven't made a form yet for this. We're just hard coding the stuff in, but you get the point. All right, so now we kind of want to follow this same principle for registering and logging out, but let's just worry about logout right now because registering is a whole other beast, and I want to get moving on to actually making a login form so we can see this in action. So let's just have a logout, and if we look at our auth service, we should already have a logout in here. So we're really just going to kind of do the same thing where this will be async. We're going to await our ref.read auth service provider .logout. And this will be, we'll call this result. I like the word result. It's nice. So this will essentially return on the right, just nothing. We don't really care about any return type because it's like, okay, yeah, the user logged out. But we do know whether it's a success or a fail. So we can do the same kind of thing here, right? Result.fold. On the left, we have an error. So maybe we just go state equals auth state error and pass in that error. I'm not sure what that error would be. We are just gonna, it's just gonna be some Dart error, I guess. Now when there's a write, we really don't have anything. So I can just use an underscore here because this is just void. This is null. We can call it anything, but underscore makes sense. And then we go state equals auth state initial. Is that what we called it? Or I guess auth state guest. Once you log out, you still are authenticated in some way. You're just a guest. Okay, so now in our main.dart, instead of calling this, we are going to go ref.read auth provider dot notifier. Remember, we have to do .notifier because this is a notifier class. Let me just fix my mouse. It's doing something funny. There we go. That's better. So we're using Riverpod's notifier here, and if we were just to say auth provider, the state is actually what we'd be referring to here is actually the auth state itself. Whereas when we talk to notifier, we're talking about this class that we've made where we have all these helper functions and stuff. So we have to remember to do that, and then we just go log out. Now we could of course await this. However, for either of these cases, and I know this is just an example anyways, we really don't have to because we're not doing anything with the result. It'll just fire it off as it sees fit. So we can actually just get rid of these and do something. If we end up deciding to return something from it, we would obviously need to await it to work with it. Okay, so let's just try this out. I'm going to click, we're going to hope, click log out. I'm now a guest. I click log in. I'm now this. If I do just a green arrow refresh, we'll see I'm still logged in, and that's just Serverpod being like, taking care of us. If I log out and refresh, we're still a guest. So that's great. So like I said, register we're going to come back to. I want to kind of get login working perfectly, and the only reason we did log out right now is because we kind of need log out to test login, obviously. So let's figure out our path for login. I have a few ideas in mind. There's different ways I've done forms, and I'm going to try it one way, a way that I know is done a lot in block, and see if it gives us any problems. And in the case that it does, maybe we'll go back to the way that I like to do it. Either way, it's pretty straightforward. So for this, we're going to go into our auth feature. Inside, let's first of all make a screen, and we're going to just call this login screen.dart. And let's just make a stateless. What do I want to use here? I actually want to use because we want access to Riverpod, we are going to use a consumer. Now you'll see if you're doing this, you might not have all these other options that I'm seeing when I do stateless. You might just see stateless widget. However, the reason I have that is I have an extension for Riverpod. So we go here and you can see that I have I don't think that's the one. It might be actually. Let me just see which ones I have enabled. Riverpod. Okay, yeah, it is this one. So Flutter Riverpod snippets, cool. You can install it if you like, but I can do stateful widget here and get instead of just a stateful widget like normal, I can actually do a stateful consumer. And the reason I want to be using this as stateful is because, actually, my mistake. This is just going to be a state. This itself is going to be a stateless widget because this is just the screen itself. So we're just going to call this login screen. For now, we're just going to return a scaffold. And maybe in the app bar, we'll do an app bar with a title of text login, and everything is good there. Now for our body, this is where we want to break this up. So I like to keep things very separated, especially in the UI side, and we're actually going to make a component called login form.dart. And this is where I wanted to do a stateful consumer as opposed to a stateful widget. They're very similar. Stateful consumer is just Riverpod's version of a stateful widget, which gives us access to ref. So we'll call this login form. And we'll just have to import a couple things here, make sure we got material as well. We'll have the material one. All right, cool. And for now, let's just return text, make sure stuff's working, and say hello. And over here, we're going to use the login form. And we have some weird things that got auto-imported. Sometimes that happens, so we'll get rid of them. Okay, so now what I want to do is we'll go to our main.dart. And we have all this example stuff here, which is fine. We're going to keep it, kind of. However, where's the best place to do this? You know what? We're not going to keep it. I mean, I'm going to keep it. I'm going to comment it out just so we have it for reference. It'll get removed at some point, obviously. And in fact, this will change a few times because we're going to be adding a router pretty soon, and it'll be totally different. But we're just in the initial setup. So here, let's just make the home login screen, just like that. And you know, we can make it a const. So now if we go back to our lovely thing, we're going to see our login screen and our hello. So inside our login form now, we're going to want a column because we're going to have multiple things. And we're going to give it some children. We're also going to want to make this a single child scroll view. Actually, no, we don't. We're going to do that in the screen itself. So let's do that before we forget about it. The body of it is actually going to be a single child scroll view. That way, if someone's on a really small screen, they can scroll the login form. All right, so in here, we're going to have a text form field. And we can give it some decoration, text decoration. So sorry, not text decoration, it's input decoration. And we'll give it a label. We'll just do it this way for now. And its text will be email address, because that's what we need to log in. Then what we also need to do is actually have some controllers for this. So we're going to make a controller here. It'll be we'll just do text editing controller, and we'll call this email controller, and we're just going to instantiate it right away. And we're going to do the same for our password. Okay, we also need a form key. So we're going to make a final global key. It'll be of type form state, and we'll just call it form key. And we're just going to do global key. We're just going to do this exact same thing here. Now, this is usually, equals. Oh, I have to also instantiate it, just like I'm doing there. Now, you'll see this in the docs a lot. We technically don't have to include this stuff here because we're assigning it right here. It knows it already is that. So we're just going to do it like that. So we're going to wrap this whole column in a form and give this key form key. Now, the reason I want to be using a stateful widget for this as opposed to just a stateless widget is we want access to our what is it? Dispose, I think it's called. Yeah, dispose, that's what it is, silly. And we want to make sure that we are taking our email controller and disposing it, as well as our password controller and disposing it when basically this unmounts. I don't think I have to do the form key. No, there we go. That's the main reason for why I do this as a stateful widget, stateful widget. Okay, so we have our form key here, and you'll see what that does in a bit if you're not familiar. But we need to add a controller, and I like to usually do the controller as the first property of a text form field, and this will be email controller. Then we might also want a validator, and for now, the way validation works is we get a value from it, and what we need to return is either an error message or null. If we end up returning null, it means it's valid. So first of all, we can check if value equals null or value.isEmpty. We can return a message that says email required. Now, if value is not a valid email address, we might want to do something as well. So for this, let me just find my reference file for this help. There we go, string utils. No. Oh, it's probably called validators. 1 second. Validation utils. All right. So I want to basically also make sure it's a valid email. It has an @ sign. It has a, follows that. And what we're going to do is in core, we don't have very much going on in core yet, but we will grow. I'm going to make a new folder called utils. And inside here, we're going to have something called string utils. Now, this is just something I'm pulling from another project. Sorry, I didn't want to do string utils. I wanted to do validation utils or validator. What do you think? Validation. Validation utils. So I'm going to pull this over and kind of walk you through it. So I have some sort of things for that I use on lots of projects, and we have isValidEmail, which checks if it's a valid email address. We have something for URL. We have checking usernames, valid password, and we can, of course, update these to our liking, so on and so forth. And then what I've also created inside here is essentially a way that we can make this a lot easier for us to work with in our forms. So if you look at this, we have a validator for email, and this is essentially the same kind of thing here. We have, checking if it is null or checking if it is empty. We want to, return this. And then we have this other check, which is what I was getting at doing here for isValidEmail. And this really just calls this little utility function right here to do a regular expression and check if it matches. And the cool thing about doing it this way, we're actually conforming exactly to the shape of this. So we have string, function, like it's the exact same thing. So instead of typing all this out in the UI, I could actually just make a reference to it. So one thing I could do, I could go value here and go like this and do it like that and pass in value. We need to import this, of course. Oh, and it's actually within a class called, just to keep everything clean, validation utils. So I can do it like that, and that's totally fine. But what's really cool is because we're passing the same thing in here that it requires, we can actually just pass a reference to this function and replace all of this and replace this, and it will work just the same way. So that's just a lot cleaner. All right. So now we have a validator, which is nice, which will come in handy soon. Let's copy this, and actually let's look at our thing. I guess something isn't saved yet. Yeah, let's save this. There we go. We have our lovely form here. Cool. Now let's copy this, and let's actually make this use password controller, and we'll call this password. Now for this, we don't want to use our validator email. Really, I think I might have one for form validator password. However, for this is something good to use on register, but I don't really want to enforce it on login because maybe our rules change with with registration partway through our app being live. We kind of want to make sure that you can just kind of type anything in. So what we can use instead is this form validator not empty. Now this one works a little bit differently because you see there's a second parameter, and that's so that we can recycle this and reuse it on different types of fields. You'll notice this one just says password required, password not strong enough because it's for a password, and same with the email one and phone number, but this is a little more generic. So to do this, we actually kind of have to do it the more old school way, I guess, and call it by passing through the value. So we're just doing the same thing I showed a moment ago. However, this second parameter is where we put the name of the field, and we're just using password. And that's just so that when the error comes back, it says password required because we're passing that through. This could, of course, say username, or it could say whatever we want, but in this case, password. All right. So now we have that. We also need some kind of button. So let's have let's just make for now an elevated button. And on pressed, we're going to do something. The child will be login. Just an FYI, I am making the UI right now very basic, very boring. At some point in a future video, probably a couple videos from now, we're going to get basically create sort of like our own UI library framework that is going to work with our app. And we'll be using these different types of buttons that we'll have custom control over. But for now, this is totally fine. Let's just see how that looks. So we have our login button, cool. And we need to do something there. So let's figure that out. So for our, the first thing we want to do when someone logs in is we want to validate the form. And to do that, we can go form key dot current, I always grab state or context, but let's just find out. It is current state. Now we are required to put an exclamation mark here because the form state itself of the form key might be null, but we know it. We safely know it isn't. You could put a check there. I've never had a problem though. We're good. As long as you're on the screen and this thing's been here, like you're going to have a state. So if we want to actually check if it isn't valid, then we just want to return out of this. And let's just test that out right now. So I'm going to first of all click login, and you'll see email required. Let's actually put something for email, but not a valid email, and we'll see it changes to invalid email. Let's actually make it a somewhat valid email. And now that error goes away, but this one's still giving us an error, and here we can put in this. Now you'll notice I type my password, but I can see it, and it's usually pretty common not to do that. So what we want to do is just pass obscure text true to our form field, not to the decoration, but to the form field. And then we get this lovely, thing here. Okay, so basically we'll short circuit out of this if it doesn't validate. Otherwise, we're going to do something. So we're going to go back to our main.dart because we already kind of have this code. Let's find it here. And I'm just going to paste it. And we need to import auth provider. And we have ref. Now, if you're trying this on your own and you're like, I don't have access to ref, the reason we have access to ref is because we're using a consumer stateful widget. You don't see it here, but inside consumer stateful widget, somewhere in this code, you'll find like a reference to ref. And I think even if you click this, maybe, yeah, there you can find the reference to it. So it does exist. Now, when you're using just a consumer widget, ref is actually something passed into the build function. So you'll actually see something like widget ref there, which we've seen already. Okay, so now we're going to do, our auth provider.login with email, but of course we no longer have to use hard-coded data here. We're going to use the text or the email controller dot text, and I'm actually going to go dot trim on it. Serverpod might automatically handle that, but that'll just make sure there's no white space before or white space after and make someone confused why they can't log in. For password, we'll use password controller.text, but we won't trim this because a space at the end of your password is still a valid password. All right, so let's test this out. And in order for us to know if it's working, let's actually just put something like we had before in our example screen. Let's see if I can find it. Yeah, we had this cool thing here. Yeah, I'm just going to grab, I'm going to grab this builder. And we're going to put the builder right here. We're going to uncomment it. And now we need also the auth state that we were watching. So we're just going to grab this. So I was kind of mentioning before, like if you don't say .notifier, you're actually we're talking to the state itself, the auth state. When I do have .notifier, which we do down here, right? We have the auth provider.notifier. If I actually have that, for one, I shouldn't be watching. I should be using read. And you'll see the auth state is actually a reference to this thing called auth, which is that class that we made. And we can also use Control Alt and click through to it just to see what that really is. And it's this auth thing that we made. Okay, so we want to, not watch the notifier, but just watch the state itself. And looks like we need to import some things here. And then I think I missed, there we have the builder. It's probably something like this. So just a missing. Okay, just hardest thing in Flutter is finding out when you copy something over what is wrong. Okay, so we have this. Oh, we need one more of these. All right, there we go. So I'm just putting that there temporarily. So we see we are this person, which is a little bit more annoying to test. But let's just hopefully I can remember an old password or something. Tether2. And let's see, this might not work. It says I am guest. That's interesting. So maybe we do want to do something when I'm assuming I just typed in the wrong password. Let's actually get to the bottom of that right now because, well, let's do our now at least we can try, my Tyler3 one, which I think this is right. And we should see I'm logged in as that person. When I do Tyler2, I shouldn't necessarily, just get logged out. Although technically this is kind of fine because we're not even going to show the login screen in the real app if you already are logged in. But let's figure out what's going on there because ideally we want to, show some kind of message. Okay, so we have our login with email function. Let's bring that over here. Let's make as much space as possible. So here we go. This result. I wonder why it went to. Oh, you know why? This is happening? This is a weird edge case, and it's because I think we didn't have a user object. We kind of added that custom user object after we had some, test accounts. So I think what's happening here, which won't happen in the real world, is we have we're getting a successful authentication, but then down here we're actually getting an error because it's not finding that person. We can maybe even just fix that. I'm going to open up our database tool, which I'm using dbeaver. It's a pretty good tool. There's definitely better ones out there. This one's just free and open source, so and it works on all platforms. If you are willing to spend a bit of money because you want something like this, Data Grip by JetBrains is my favorite one. So yeah, that's exactly what's happening here. Let me just totally refresh and make sure we're good. Open mic. Actually, let's close these. I think they might stay in memory. And I know this is a little bit small. Unfortunately, I can't really zoom this app in the recording. Okay, so we have our user table here, and you see, we only have the one reference. So let's just look at our user info, which is the built-in Serverpod one. Let's see what IDs. So we need one for 1, 2, and 3. Yeah, so we can just create those. Now, how do I create in this program? There's a way to edit this. Edit, inline edit, add row. Here we go. So we're going to just do 2 because this is the this is just the ID of this this user table. And let's just make this, and in fact, you know what, let's just kind of clean this up, and we'll have like user 2 as the bio here, user 1, and I'm going to see if I can edit this to say 1, which is kind of makes more sense, and this is how it will usually work when these are going to get added at the same time. Let's insert one more row, add a row. Oh no, went to the wrong, I don't want the order there. Okay, how do I undo? Oh my gosh. Okay, we're just gonna try this again. 2, 3, 2, 3. We'll call this user 3 just so we have some bios that make sense. User 2. Now there's a way I'm just editing this in memory. We actually have to apply these. Apply cell changes. Okay, I think that maybe worked. No, maybe I have to save it. Error synchronizing with database. Duplicate key on index, yeah. Yeah, it's, editing something like this is not necessarily a great idea. Let's just ignore that plan, and maybe soon we'll probably just wipe our database. But this is working fine. We'll just test it starting with Tyler 3 onwards. So Tyler 3, login. There we go. Let's just try one though that we know doesn't exist and make sure that I'm right about this. So I'm going to do Tyler 5. And now we get like this ... because an error happened. Now we want to do something with that error. And I wonder why it was ... Let's find out. Oh, because we're actually just using this. So we should be able to actually make a case here for auth state error. And when it's an error, we actually will have access to the error itself. So we can actually, in theory, print auth state .error. So let's actually see what the error really is. So could not log in. That's cool. So let's actually just, like I said, we're not going to worry too much about UI right now, just functionality. So let's actually style this to be like colors.red, just a text style on it, so that we could have that. Cannot log in is a pretty good error message, but I think we could say something like no user found with those credentials. This is still not good. So now if we try it again, we'll get that no user found. Maybe it's just going to be like incorrect email or password. So we'll try that again. Incorrect email or password. Okay, cool. Now if we try to then do our Tyler 3 again, we should go back hello. There we go. Okay, now obviously this is great, but we want to also do something when the login is successful. And in that case, we can also in here do something. This is something that we haven't done in Serverpod yet. We can actually go ref.listen, and we can listen to our auth provider like this. And actually, let me just remember how this works. Let's see. So listen, the first parameter is going to be the provider, and then it's a listen. And I believe it's going to be previous state and next state. So let's actually print out what those are. We'll have prev, and we'll print out prev state. And we'll do the same here. We'll just copy this again. Next. Nexty. I'm keeping that. And I'm just doing a green arrow rebuild just to make sure everything's nice and happy. So we see previous, we have instance of auth state booting, and then next auth state success. So let us get logged out, and we found there's actually a hack for us to log out. We can use that Tyler2 at tylersavory.com. And let's just log that. Oh, wait, was it Tyler? Was it just this one that? There we go. I think it was this one that didn't work. Hello, guest. Okay, so we're logged out now. Let's just make sure we are logged out. Yeah, we're still a guest. Okay, so we see we have auth state booting was the previous, and auth state guest is what came next. So what we want to watch for, this is going to fire every time the state changes. And in the case that we want to basically check if next state, actually there's a couple ways we could do this. Let's do it with a switch statement. So we can actually switch next state And it's kind of like what we were doing down here, right? Switching the auth state. And we can go essentially case auth state success. We can redirect. So let's just, for now, we don't have a router yet, or like we don't have another page to redirect to yet. So let's just, print something that says redirecting. I like to print a lot. And we'll just break out of that. In the case that there is maybe auth state error, we can do something else. Let's just for now print error. And again, we can do the same kind of thing where we actually print the next state dot error, because when we're inside this, Dart knows that it's going to have access to error. And default, we can just have a default here. We don't really have to do anything, so let's just break out of it. Okay, so I'm just going to get rid of these, and let's just try this out. So right here, we're a guest. Everything's fine. We're going to use Tyler3. And log in. We should see here redirecting. So that's going to get us to redirect and log in. Now, if there's an error, let's just try that again. Tyler5, which we don't have in our database. We get this nice little thing here. That's nice. And we also see this down here. And this is a good place where we could essentially put a toast on the screen, like a little temporary message instead of putting it here. I'm good with, I think that's the way to do it. So for toasts, what we're going to do is we're going to also make a util. We'll keep this very basic at first, but eventually it will be fleshed out. Toast utils.dart. So we're going to make a class called toast utils. And inside here, we're going to have a static void function. It's not going to return anything called, we'll just do message first, and then we'll also have one for error, I think. We're going to require the build context to get it passed in, as well as a message. Maybe we won't call it message because that's the same word here. So let's just call it like text or something. And this is something we can improve. Now we can use something called scaffold messenger of context. And that's why we want access to the context, because we need to actually find the closest scaffold in going up the widget tree. And then we can just run show snackbar. And this takes a parameter called snackbar. And the content itself, we're just going to do text and do that text that we essentially passed in. Right there. This guy's getting passed in. Everything's good. Let's just add some commas, as is tradition. We can flesh this out more at some point. We can add like a little dismiss button. We can have an icon. We can do a lot. But this is enough for us to really test this out. So now we'll go back to our login form. So instead of just printing the error, we're going to go toastutils.message. And here we want to let's actually pass in that error. So we can go next state.error. There we go. For redirecting, we can do something pretty similar. We can go, toast.message. We still have to do the redirect, but we can just do something like welcome back. And we have their user. We have the username. That's a required field. So we can actually go and say next state.user.username. Userinfo.username. Something like that. Now this could be null, so what we could, it shouldn't be null in our case, but let's handle it just so we don't get if we use an exclamation mark, this could create a crash. Like this could just crash your app. If we do this, it's not a crash with a question mark, but it will say welcome back null. So we can actually do something like this where this could be null at this point. We can do a double thing like this and actually pass in something like, welcome back, you. I don't know. That's one way to do it. We could also probably make it a little bit cleaner where we actually check this ahead of time. So maybe what we'll do is we're going to make something called final message equals, and we'll check if the user info is null. So let's go, if this equals null, then our message is just going to be welcome back. Again, shouldn't be null, but let's just handle it. And right here, otherwise, we will put in welcome back and paste in this right here. So we'll just string interpolate it and still have the exclamation mark at the end. And here, we know this isn't null at this point. So we can safely put an exclamation mark here because we already checked if it's null. Then in here, instead of passing this, we actually will just pass the message. And astute viewers know we could put this right in here, like there's no reason, but I think having it as its own one line, because it's kind of long already, just is a little bit cleaner. Okay, so let's try that out. Now we have to kind of do our hack where we log in with Tyler, and then we get moved to a guest. Now we'll do Tyler 3 again, and we see this lovely message down here. Welcome back, Tyler. Now if we do it with a, something wrong, we see this. Now we're going to make this cleaner where, we'll probably have like a red background when there's an error and that kind of stuff, but that's a problem for another day. Now that we sort of have it implemented, it'll be easy for us to refactor in the future. So in that case, I'm going to get rid of this builder because we don't really need it. And auth state, the only reason we had this was for that builder, so we can also get rid of that watcher there. So yeah, just a review here, we're just listening to our auth provider when things change. We're checking next state. We don't necessarily care about previous state. We may learn at some point we need to, but we're good. And this will either redirect them, which we need a to-do there. Let's do to-do, redirect, and we should be good. All right, and we're at the 40-minute mark roughly. So I think this is actually a great place to end this video, and we will see you in the next one, where what are we going to do? Well, come and find out. See you soon.